Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a couple of notes before we get started. This presentation will be recorded, and you'll be receiving a copy of the recording about this time tomorrow. If you have any questions during the course of the presentation, you can type them in the questions and answer box, and our presenter will answer them at the end of the presentation. And if you'd like to view any of our previous and upcoming webinars, you can do so by heading over to the events page at barracuda.com. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Asaf Cidon.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Asaf, and today I'm going to focus specifically on, I'll broadly categorize the real estate and construction industries. What I'm going to talk about is going to be relevant for you if you have anything to do with real estate management, buying, selling, construction, engineering, legal. So everything I'm going to talk about is relevant for you. Even if you're not, by the way, in this industry, but you are in an industry where there's high frequencies of large financial transactions, this may also be relevant to you as well. What we'll cover, why real estate construction? Why am I focusing on these industries in particular? And why are they a gold mine for cyber criminals? And we've been seeing just a significant rise in attacks against these industries. Then we'll cover some of the types of attacks that we see. And in particular, we'll cover email account takeover, which seems to be one of the most prevalent attacks against these industries. And then finally, we'll talk about how to actually defend your organization and your clients using AI. Just a quick introduction about myself. So I'm the VP of email security here at Barracuda Networks, and actually lead the products, all of our email security products that include our gateway-based products, our cloud products, and our AI-based products as well. And so I've been kind of living, breathing email and email attacks, and have worked a lot with our real estate customers, and I've heard a lot of war stories that I'm also going to share with you today. So with that, let's start with, why are we doing this webinar, right? Focus specifically on real estate and construction. Attackers are really targeting these industries, and there's several reasons for it. The first one, these industries deal with large, frequent money transfers. So when you're dealing with construction project, or when you're managing real estate, it's very common that ownership changes. You're dealing with a lot of outside contracts. The contractors charge a lot of money, and so these are places where the attackers can insert themselves and use techniques like impersonation or account takeover to deceive one of the parties in the transaction and try to extract a wire transfer. Another reason, these industries contain a plethora of financial and personal information that is worth a lot of money in the black market if you're an attacker. The fact that these industries communicate a lot with external parties, again with contractors, vendors, makes them an attractive target. Another fact here is that almost any employee in these industries is an attractive target. Unlike other industries where, you really want to hone in, if you're an attacker, on the finance department maybe, or on the HR department, within these industries, pretty much anybody in the organization has access to sensitive data. And so it makes it a lot easier to target. And then finally, I'll say this with with a little bit of caution, given the crowd, but generally speaking, with a lot of the folks in these industries that I've talked to, there is some level of lax security standards, not because the IT teams haven't done a good job or anything like that, but because oftentimes employees have a large degree of freedom in these organizations. So, for example, if you're looking at a real estate firm or at a law firm, for example, the agents or the lawyers basically oftentimes don't really listen to IT and kind of have their own little mini practice, and so they are highly susceptible to attacks. So let's dive into some of these. And so before that, we're not the only ones saying that real estate and construction are a big target. In fact, the FBI has actually recently come out with a report, a very detailed report, specifically just on the real estate sector. You guys can just actually go ahead and Google it and find it online. It's super interesting. It's a couple of pages long. In the past, they used to just publish these reports across industries, but this year they've really focused on real estate. And in particular, these are some quotes from that report. So BEC and EAC actors, I'll explain what those acronyms mean in a bit, are heavily targeted the real estate sector in recent years. This includes title companies, law firms, real estate agents, buyers, and sellers. I'm also including here at the bottom, these are all just a few snippets from headlines that we've seen from the news. So hackers allegedly steal $1.5 million from DC couple in home buying phishing scheme. Scammers lurking in email thread take $379,000 in Oregon. Again, all you guys need to do is just do a simple Google search, and you'll find tons of examples of successful attacks against the real estate sector that have caused people to really lose their lifetime savings or cause the firms themselves considerable financial damage. So, reason number one, just the top reason, these are your firms deal just with large amounts of money on a regular basis, right? And so I've just listed a few examples here, right? Title companies receive escrows, law firms facilitate wire transfers, maybe engineering, construction firms need to receive and send payments on a regular basis from contractors and outside vendors, suppliers. Agents send wiring instructions. If you're a real estate management firm, you need to collect rent or fees on a regular basis, right? And so for each one of these transactions, at the minimum, is thousands of dollars, and quite often could be tens of thousands, hundreds, or millions of dollars. And so for an attacker sitting, in Eastern Europe or East Asia, for example, that's a great payoff for a cyber hack, right? So if you can extract $50,000 with the work of a few kind of Russian trolls, not to put them on the spot, that are not paid that much, the economic model here is just extremely attractive. And so we're seeing the average real estate firm getting targeted thousands of times a month with targeted attacks, specifically trying to impersonate employees, impersonate external vendors, and really try to insert themselves into the transactions. The payoffs are enormous industry-wide. So the FBI released new statistics on just total damages from business email compromise, which are attacks that go after wire transfers. And so there's been $12 billion of losses in the last 4 years due to these attacks. This completely dwarfs any other cybersecurity attack we've seen in recent years. Like, the numbers here are off the charts. If I compare this, for example, to ransomware, there's an order of magnitude difference in terms of the payoffs from business email compromise and fraudulent wire transfers compared to, for example, ransomware spam. And so attackers are just flocking to this new type of attack. And just in the last couple of years, we've seen, significant increases. So this is, a fast-growing, criminal industry, growing kind of in triple digits. Second reason that real estate, construction firms, engineering firms are a prime target is they have a lot of very sensitive data. So this is, again, a short list of all the data that these firms have. It's anywhere from tax returns, social security numbers, bank accounts, blueprints, financial history, a lot of information about, again, vendors, contractors. All of this information can be monetized in various ways, right? So the most obvious way to monetize it is just sell it off. If you can get, I'll take the example of a real estate firm or a brokerage firm. If you can get the financial information for all of the clients in the firm, that could be worth a lot of money if you sell that on the dark web. Other cyber criminals and fraudsters would pay a big premium to get the tax returns of individuals, and if you could get many of them in one hack, that's worth could be worth tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then the more sophisticated attackers, instead of actually selling it off, will actually use that information, right? So you can use that information to impersonate in a very effective way, and then to, if you know that there's a deal about to happen that the individual is going to be involved with, you can target them specifically, and you could even use it for extortion, blackmail against individuals. Third reason, frequent communications. I mean, there's many parties involved, in these firms. Within a firm, it could, there's many employees, but also across firms. It's a buyer, seller, contractor, lender, right? Each and every one of these could be attacked, right? So you could, if I'm an attacker, like if you put yourself in their shoes, I can go after the law firm that's doing, that's helping with the transaction. I can go after the contractor. I can go after the agent, the buyer agent, the seller agent, the title company, right? Any of these, if I can effectively impersonate any one of them, and for example, just change the bank account number when I'm sending the wiring instructions or in the terms of the agreement, I can suddenly, divert hundreds of thousands of dollars to the wrong place, right? All of these systems are built on kind of human trust and are not very robust. So attackers take advantage of that. And especially when that impersonation comes in within a very, contextual kind of communication. So like, if you're actually working, like if I'm a buyer and I'm about to buy a deal, about to buy a house, and I've already talked to my title company several times, and right before I'm going to wire the money, I'm getting an email from them telling me where to wire the money to. I am not going to be suspicious, right? It's going to seem totally legitimate. And so a lot of, people, even people with high security awareness, are falling for these schemes. And we've seen that again in the data. So this is actually from the FBI report. So the FBI, this is monthly real estate victims that go to the FBI. I mean, this is, for me, pretty insane, right? Just in the US, like in May 2018, when this report was written, you're seeing we've already crossed 100 firms a month where they've lost substantial, amounts of money due to a fraudulent wire transfer. And they actually gave a call to the FBI. By the way, I'm sure there's many other firms that didn't give a call to the FBI because they were afraid. But you're literally looking at, these are, more than 100 firms a month getting successfully hacked with high dollar amounts. I mean, and by the way, each one of these incidents, on average, if I'm not mistaken, is over $100,000. So, I mean, if you look at this on a monthly basis, the amounts of money that are getting lost are just staggering. Reason number 4, all employees are targets. And this is, again, getting into the economic incentives of the attackers. It is hard, like if you're trying to hack and steal money from a company, and the only person in that company that deals with wire transfers, has anything to do with wire transfers, is the CFO, it's a lot harder to hack that company, because that CFO is probably getting a lot of attempted hacks. They're probably more aware of the problem. Maybe even the security team of that company is keeping an eye on their activity. So it's just a lot harder to successfully hack such a company. But within the real estate, engineering, construction industries, all employees are targets. And so the attackers can go off just the weakest link. They don't have to go after the CFO. They can go after any agent, any person that deals with third-party vendors, right? And so that's way easier, right? And so you just need a new agent joins the firm, and you just hack them, and immediately you get access to very sensitive and high amount transaction information. So it's just, again, a much better, quote unquote, better, easier insertion point for attackers than other industries. And then finally, last reason here is lax security standards. And again, it's not because you're doing your job or the security teams are not doing their jobs. It's because in a lot of these industries, employees do have a lot of discretion and a lot of autonomy, right? So when you're talking about lawyers and agents, they have a lot of autonomy. But even if you're looking at like construction firms, right, employees are out in the field. Employees need to be able to talk and deal with outside contractors on a daily basis and even facilitate payments. You don't want the IT team to be investigating every single payment. It would slow the firm down, make it impossible to do their job. And so these firms just have a lot of autonomy granted to employees, and that autonomy also brings with it dangers. And so that, just creates a ton of holes. Specifically, I gave a few specific examples here that we see in the real estate industry. So, agents use their personal emails for work. I think this is also true in construction. Very, very common. Personal email is very susceptible to getting hacked. It's not even going through the email security systems. Weak passwords, just generally, if people are using their personal email or even their corporate email, but IT doesn't have, can't enforce strong policies. No security awareness training is also very common for a lot of the firms that we talk to, because the agents don't really listen to IT, for example. It's hard to implement security awareness policies unless they're kind of really simple and regimented. And then another really common one is we see in a lot of these firms different people in the firms setting up their own email systems. Again, really common, for example, in like brokerage firms, where the agents will literally just spin up their own marketing automation system or like sales tracking tool and start sending emails from that tool. That's great maybe for business and for bringing in more revenue, but that's super problematic from the standpoint of email security, because that means that they might be sending emails from the domain of the company through all of these different third-party tools that IT doesn't even know about or have any control over, and that makes the firm much more likely to be spoofed and impersonated, because it's much harder to set up email authentication like DMARC or SPF or DKIM. So this is also something very common, especially for larger firms, where it's just very hard to get a hold of all the third-party senders that have been implemented by the different employees. And again, all of this is kind of leading to just large amounts of losses. So we're seeing, again, from these attacks, real estate related losses are at the point where they're above $10 million a month. Again, so this is huge, right? Just in terms of the economic impact for a lot of our customers. And again, I'm sure many of you are experiencing this on a daily basis. So I'm not sure I even have to tell you about this. Okay, so one thing now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a deep dive into a specific type of attack, which is email account takeover that was mentioned in the FBI reports, and is the cause of a lot of the rise in kind of the losses that we're seeing in the real estate sector. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you a kind of anatomy of this attack, so explain how this attack works, and then also why this attack is actually very hard to intercept by your existing email security systems. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about what you can actually do to help stop some of these attacks. So I don't know if you are familiar with email account takeover. Again, if you're in the industry, you likely are. But email account takeover is where an attacker manages to steal the credential of one of the employees in your firm. Could be because they phished that employee, could be because that employee was using a weak password, or maybe they stole the credentials on a separate website and reused the same email, the same password for their corporate email. In any case, with account takeover, basically that employee's credentials are hacked and the attacker actually logs in remotely as that employee, and then starts doing kind of various nefarious activities from within that employee's account. For example, sending emails to one of your customers or clients, or sending emails to other, let's say, third-party firms that you work with as that employee. Obviously, these attacks are just very hard to stop because they're actually from the real employee's email account, right? They're not impersonating someone from the outside. They're actually already in your network. And so anytime an attacker gets a hold into your network, that's obviously just a lot harder to stop because, the email header will appear totally normal. They'll come from the real email address. There's not going to be any spoofing involved. And so, it's just much harder to spot. So let me give you kind of a sense of the anatomy of these attacks. So the first step is external infiltration. So typically, the most common way for attackers to get in is through phishing. So they'll, for example, email one of your employees with like a fake DocuSign email or fake Microsoft Outlook email as an example. That will lead them to a fake login page where they'll need to put in their credentials. And then they put in their credentials and then, the attackers basically have a hold of their username and password. Next step after that, oftentimes in real estate firms, is reconnaissance. Just getting access to an account is already extremely valuable. You can learn a ton about what's going on, what deals are taking place, who the firm is working with externally, who are their clients, who are the third-party vendors, suppliers, and then use that information to launch highly targeted, highly contextualized attacks. Then the next step beyond that, which is again pretty common, is kind of internal harvesting. So a lot of times the attacker will steal the credentials of one employee, and then they'll send that from that employee's account. They'll blast out thousands of employees to in the firm with another phishing email. But again, since it's coming through internal communications, oftentimes email security solutions wouldn't even scan those emails, and so they'd get delivered. And then you might get into a situation where you have hundreds of different employees that got compromised and their credentials were stolen. And then finally, monetization. And in the case of a real estate firm, the most common way to monetize it is to use that account to impersonate one of the employees, and then potentially divert a wire transfer, for example, and take it to make sure that it's going to a place that to a bank account that the attacker owns instead of the original intended bank account. So step one, I'll quickly review this, but step one, external infiltration. So again, typically impersonating one of these services like Microsoft Outlook, taking you to a fake sign-in page. Again, if you're administering email, I'm sure you've seen many of these on a day-to-day basis. One thing, by the way, a lot of our customers ask us is why doesn't, let's say, Office 365, for example, stop these emails automatically? And so the reason for that is these emails oftentimes use zero-day links. So the links themselves are often, legitimate websites that got compromised, and so they won't appear on any blacklist. They'll have a high reputation. And so that's why these emails typically get through. Also, the emails themselves might be sent from a third-party compromised account. And so the sender email address might also have a high reputation. So that's why, a lot of times these emails will appear in your employees' mailboxes. Step two, reconnaissance. So the most common ways to do this is either log in remotely. Oftentimes, so sometimes they'll just log in remotely. If they might be sitting like in a foreign country, like in Nigeria or something like that, and they'll log in remotely, and maybe those are a little bit easier to spot if you're looking at like an IP log. But the smarter attackers will actually use a VPN, maybe log in, from the country where you're based, and then it'll be a lot harder, or log in, within working hours. And then another really common thing is to set up a forwarding rule. So they will basically, just sign in and then set up within Office 365, for example, a forwarding rule that will take out all the emails to their, externally, so they'll be able to just read all the emails going on that the compromised employee was about to receive. And again, this is super, super valuable for them, right? They can just gain a lot of information from sitting in on the account. Another thing that we've been seeing more and more, which is even more nefarious, is sometimes the attackers will actually run scripts So, they will send like an email internally, for example, or externally, and they'll have a script that immediately deletes that email from the sent items folder of that employee, so that employee won't be able to see that, that email was sent from their behalf. And sometimes they'll even run a script to delete the response to that email, so the employee won't even have an idea that their account has been taken over. Again, next step, harvesting more internal credentials. So a lot of times these harvesting emails are going to look like, normal phishing email that you might see, but they are sent internally, which again makes them a lot harder to catch. Microsoft wouldn't even inspect these emails, for example. So they'll just land in your employees' mailboxes undetected. And obviously, that makes them, there's a much higher probability that if an employee gets an email from another employee, they'll open it and click on it. And then monetization, I think I talked about this a little bit, but let's say the most sophisticated ones will actually, try to impersonate that employee and kind of get into within a deal, try to divert the money elsewhere. Some of these attacks, this is probably a little less relevant for the real estate industry because, you are very high value targets for attackers. In some of our quote unquote lower value industries, for example, like education, sometimes attackers will just steal the accounts to use them as vehicles for sending additional phishing attacks to other companies like real estate firms. So if you guys occasionally see phishing emails from like legitimate, university domains, for example, oftentimes those are account compromise emails from those universities, and the attackers are actually really trying to get to you, but they're using the university as kind of a launching pad for sending phishing emails with a higher sender reputation. And the problem, is that traditional email security really fails at every step of this. So, the external infiltration, again, Office 365, for example, is really bad at catching these attacks because, they look at a lot of stuff like IP reputation, link reputation. Fortunately, a lot of these emails are coming from other compromised accounts, so they have a high reputation. Reconnaissance, harvesting more internal credentials, typically just not going to be stopped because they're not even scanning internal emails. So, there's just, and then other, traditional email security solutions, for example, like some of our competitors, they are sitting as a gateway. So they basically only inspect outbound traffic coming in, but they don't have a way of intercepting any internal email. And then finally, monetization. Again, people assume that once an account is internal, it's trusted. So they're not even looking at, what type of nefarious activity might be coming from that account. I think we've kind of covered this. So in particular, the big kind of blind spot for a lot of existing email security solutions is actually kind of fundamental. It's architectural. So traditional email security solutions are gateway-based solutions. So what that means is they basically, you guys probably have encountered this, right? They would require you to divert your MX record. So for example, let's say there's an external sender, you divert your mail flow through the email security system. The email security system, for example, will filter the emails, and then the ones that are legitimate would deliver to your mail system, for example, Office 365. Unfortunately, the problem with this model is if there is an internal email, it doesn't even go through the gateway at any point, right? So it's just routed internally, and so the gateway, even if the gateway was extremely smart, had the best AI in the world, whatever, it wouldn't even see or let alone be able to block internal traffic. So that's kind of a big problem and a big part of why these attacks are so successful. And attackers understand that, which is why they're investing heavily in account takeover. So let's talk a little bit about what to do about it. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm going to talk about AI in a bit, but first I'm going to talk about how some existing companies in the real estate sector have been trying to deal with this. So in particular, I'll highlight one of our customers at Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group, and they've been nice enough to allow us to actually share with you this account takeover checklist that they've built internally for what happens when there is an account takeover. So typically, they have several different steps. So first, they change the password of the affected account. So what will typically happen? They'll get an email from one of the employees. Hey, we've gotten this weird email from one of our employees. Can you check it out? And then they investigate, try and for example, if they have a strong enough suspicion that that employee was taken over, they typically change the password, disconnect all the active sessions. They'd scan for rules within Outlook to see if the attacker hasn't set up any forwarding rules. Then they'd run a PowerShell script to try to delete all the internal phishing emails that might have been sent from that employee. They'll submit the phishing email to Microsoft and to their security vendor. They'll scan the computer using AV. And then they'll contact internal employees or external recipients manually to tell them that an account has occurred. So, by the way, kudos to them. I think this is a fairly comprehensive list. But of course, I imagine many of you, this is a lot of work, and also, possibly some of you just don't have the time and the resources to do this entire kind of checklist. And so this is really where, and by the way, we've bucketed these. So the first two, I'd probably put in the bucket of locking down the account. The second one is more in the bucket of kind of incident response, like preventing future attacks and cleaning up the collateral damage. And the third one would be communication. And so for almost each one of these steps, we can actually help you, right, and automate these, right? So the first four here, we can actually help. AI can help in being able to automatically detect attacks automatically. So first of all, you don't have to wait for your employees to report them, and also hopefully we can detect them before the incident spreads. But also we are able to actually help you remediate these attacks without having to run your own PowerShell scripts and stuff like that, or be able to automatically detect if there was a weird forwarding rule, for example, set up on the account and give you much better visibility. And also, and the last two, even for employee communications, we can help you identify who are the affected employees automatically, and also identify who the external employees are and help you contact them, so you don't have to do all of these steps automatically. And so that leads me kind of to how we can help you solve some of these problems. And really the goal here, there's kind of the goal of security, really preventing you from, having your name involved in any one of these high profile breaches and hacks. But there's also almost an operational aspect to this. I know that in a lot of real estate firms, the IT team is just spending so much of their time dealing with these attacks, and they don't have time for anything else. And so a lot of this is how can we automate these processes and make them easier for you as an IT and security team, so you don't have to spend your entire week dealing with phishing. And so that's where Barracuda has really a comprehensive suite of solutions for this. Our gateway solution is actually, getting improved and better in terms of helping you identify these attacks. And then we also have a security awareness training solution that can really help you train your employees. But in particular, in this webinar, I'll focus on Barracuda Sentinel, which is our AI-based solution that is in particular focused on these types of targeted attacks that are affecting real estate firms. So in particular, the business email compromise attacks, the spear phishing, and account takeover. And now, Barracuda Sentinel uses AI. AI is kind of a term that's being used a lot in the industry. I actually don't want you to focus necessarily on AI. I wanted you to focus on another term, API, which is actually much more fundamental into understanding how we can help you solve this problem more effectively than probably some of your existing solutions. And so on the left here is your traditional gateway architecture that I showed earlier of how traditional email security solutions are built, where they intercept external emails before they come in. Sentinel uses a very different architecture. So it leverages the Office 365 APIs that allow us to actually kind of get into employee mailboxes. And instead of being a gateway, we can actually kind of sit and monitor each employee mailbox in real time, and also monitor and prevent internal attacks. So the way Sentinel works, it's here on the right. So an external sender will come in, will send an email. It'll actually go into Office 365, and then Office 365 will alert Sentinel that there is a new email, and then Sentinel will take action on it. But note here that even if the email is internal, so even if the email is within Office 365, Sentinel will be able to take action on it. So it's not sitting in the mail flow, it's actually kind of sitting directly within employee mailboxes. And that's really important not only to intercept internal traffic, it's also actually really important for the AI itself, because the ability to inspect mailboxes also allows us to actually gain access to historical communications. So we can actually, see all the emails currently residing in the mailbox. And that allows us to bootstrap and teach the AI about each company's unique communication patterns. And so Sentinel actually builds a unique statistical model to each individual company that allows it to really understand anomalies as it pertains to the specific company's communication patterns. So for example, if like an employee, typically doesn't communicate with specific people, only communicates at certain times, or has a specific style of communication, we'll be able to see if there's anomalies in any of those signals and be able to detect that. Whereas, in a traditional gateway, you'd have to wait, many months before you have sufficient, information and context to understand, what each employee is doing in the company. A couple of questions here. Let's see. Okay. So we use Office 365, but host our own Exchange server internally. Can we use Sentinel? Yes, so Sentinel is available for all Office 365 customers. So even if it's like a hybrid deployment or something like that, but it is available for all Office 365 customers. And then another question here is, will Sentinel be included with Essentials, or is it a standalone product? So Barracuda actually, we recently announced so it is a standalone product, but it complements Essentials. So they look at kind of different things. So Sentinel is really looking at targeted attacks that like the ones I described earlier, account takeover, whereas Essentials is more of a gateway where it's more looking at like malware, ransomware, spam coming into the account. So they really complement each other. You can buy them a la carte, or you can also, we have a new bundle for them. It's called the Total Email Protection Bundle. So, we can buy them together. We have real estate firms that have bought them separately or together. So for example, if you want to use your existing gateway or filter and you really don't want to switch, but you are getting these attacks, then you can buy Sentinel as an extra layer on top of your existing gateway. Cool. So Sentinel specifically, we've developed an account takeover solution that has three components. So the first component is preventing infiltration, so preventing those kind of zero-day phishing emails that might lead your employees from getting infiltrated in the first place. The second step is detecting anomalous user activity. So we have our AI basically is able to detect if an employee suddenly behaves in a weird way or is sending a bunch of emails internally. And we'll be able to alert you on that. And then finally, remediation. So we're actually able to delete emails. So if, for example, there was an email that was sent to a bunch of employees internally, we're able to delete them from within their mailboxes and prevent the attack from spreading to other employees. We're also able to detect if the attack was sent externally and give you visibility on that and allow you to contact those external, suppliers, vendors, customers, etc. Sentinel kind of inserts itself at different points in the account takeover process and is able to detect, prevent, and remediate these attacks in real time. Last thing but not least, kind of next steps. So what should you do about this? Generally speaking, we recommend reviewing your current email security posture. Are you securing yourself against account takeover, business email compromise? These are the two biggest forms of attacks against real estate firms. Do you feel like you have adequate defenses? What are your current internal processes in place? We do have actually a free, so if you would like to understand better how to get protected against these attacks, please contact us. We do have a free Office 365 vulnerability scan, scan.barracudanetworks.com. It's actually really cool. It scans it's free. It goes back in time and runs our AI against your account. It kind of tells you, if Barracuda was in place in the past, here are the types of attacks we would have been able to catch, and gives you a lot of also reporting and analytics on your mailboxes. It's free, so it's pretty nice. So I'd recommend just checking it out. Let's see here, another question. Every email company talks about AI. Is yours different than others? So I agree. A lot of AI is kind of a term that's being thrown around the industry a lot these days. I think the biggest difference is not the specific algorithm that that we would use versus other companies. Or whether, how many PhDs we have in our team versus other companies. By the way, I'm a PhD, but I can tell you that's not the most important thing. I'd say that really the most important thing when you're looking at any type of AI-based solution is access to data. And your AI solution is only as good as what type of data you're able to train it on. And in particular, we have, really strategic advantage, structural advantage, because Sentinel is able to look at, as I said, because of its access to the APIs, it is able to train and gather statistics about internal communication and historical communications that are, for example, our competitors would be totally oblivious to because they're sitting as a gateway, so they don't have access to those things. So even if our competitors, hire the best machine learning people in the world and they use, the most deep neural networks, if you don't have access to internal communications, historically, I can tell you your ability to catch account takeovers or business email compromises is greatly diminished because you don't know how that employee normally communicates when they're talking to their colleagues, or what email addresses they use, or what text, what style they use to communicate. So overall, I think that's really where we have a big advantage. On top of that, Barracuda does have a lot of we have a lot of customers, and we also have a lot of customers beyond email. So we see a lot of data. We have the firewall business, web security gateway business. And so a lot of the other email security vendors are, only get feeds from email, whereas we have much broader feeds. So again, it's all as good. So that's why I was mentioning earlier that the key acronym here is not AI, it's actually API. It's the ability to actually get the information from within the employee mailboxes. That's important. Excellent. So unless we have any last minute question here, that's it for today. So really appreciate your time here. And again, get in touch with us if you have any questions, even if they're not related to our product. General questions about security, email security for real estate. I think we have quite a lot of experience in these industries, so feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much.